Vice President Kamala Harris being called a bully with a poor work ethic. Reports of dysfunction growing inside the VP's office, while more high-profile staffers are reportedly looking to the exits. Axios says there are staff concerns about being branded as a Harris person after working for her is leading many aides to look for new jobs. This comes after a blistering report by the Washington Post where a former Harris staffer details how bad working there can be. Quote, "It's clear that you're not working with somebody who is willing to do the prep and the work. With Kamala, you have to put up with a constant amount of soul-destroying criticism and also her own lack of confidence. So you're constantly sort of propping up a bully, and it's not really clear why." Those kinds of accusations seem to go against this President Biden after taking office. This is what he said.
I'm not joking when I say this. If you're ever working with me and I hear you treat another colleague with disrespect, talk down to someone, I promise you I will fire you on the spot. On the spot. No ifs, ands, or buts. Everybody is entitled to be treated with decency and dignity.
But don't worry, this weekend, a single Harris staffer tweeted this out. "I work for Vice President Harris on behalf of the American people as Deputy Director for Operations and absolutely love my job. Just thought some of you should know," with a smiley face. Greg, I think at some point she might ask her junior staffers to stop trying to help.
Yeah,
it's not helping.
That was like the equivalent of a teacher's pet reminding the teacher that she forgot to ask for the homework that was due. That was just like everybody in the office is just looking at that guy and just going, "What?" But anyway, I'm on Team Kamala. This sounds like a bunch of whiners that are intimidated by a strong woman of color. I think they're probably misogynist and probably racist, because after all, that's what they'd say if you had the same criticism. This is a good problem for society to have. When we find out that we have an awful leader in the second highest office in the land is also a person of color, that is a sign of progress, right? She has reached a point in society where she is no better than obnoxious white old guys. That is really, I mean, look, this is a true achievement in diversity, and we can't ignore it. She's just as awful as all the white guys that came. This is like the moon landing for identity politics, right? A woman of color has finally gone where no woman of color has ever gone before. She can be a complete, utter jerk, just like a Kennedy can, just like anybody can. But the bigger lesson here is that you cannot judge people by a single variable, in this case, identity, because then you never find out who the person really is, right? So many mistakes are made by following this single variable of identity. Liz Warren screwed up her life, as pretending to be a Native American because she thought that was the variable. The elevation of Jacob Blake, that was because a single variable, identity. The choice of blaming an SUV over a criminal was based on a single variable, identity. So all of the biggest mistakes that we're making is identity. Kamala is teaching you that this doesn't work in the employment world. You cannot rely on diversity quotas to find out if somebody is competent or not. It just appears.
It's an interesting way to look at it. There was a question today at the briefing from Jackie Heinrich to Jen Psaki about that tweet, but about the larger issue. Let's listen to that.
The director of operations put out a tweet today talking about how much he loved his job. There was a similar sort of social media push this summer following some negative headlines about ongoings in the vice president's office. Did anybody ask the deputy director to put out a positive tweet today, or was that all him?
I'm not aware of any asks for a positive tweet or a specific tweet. I would point you to the vice president's office, but I work with a number of people in the vice president's office who certainly are looking forward to continuing their jobs.
This is a question they probably don't want there, Jesse. The other thing is that I thought it was kind of a sick burn with that anonymous former staffer saying she doesn't do her reading or look at the briefing.
Yeah. Kamala's office is like what would happen if the New York Jets became vice president. It would just be a comedy of errors that everybody would enjoy. I think it is a little unfair, though, for the Washington Post to put out this juicy quote, soul-destroying criticism. Mm-hmm. You can't say that and not give us a direct quote. I mean, they covered Donald Trump for 4 years, wrote books about the guy, and then had the most vividly colorful quotes attributed to Donald Trump. And you can't say one thing that she said was soul-crushing criticism?
That's so true, yeah.
I mean, what does it mean she's a bully? Was she giving wedgies? You have to tell us what that means. It's not fair to the reader. It comes off as cheap. And then it goes into the predictable cycle, like, all right, well, you know, she's only being attacked because she's a woman of color. But she's being attacked by Democrats who wanted to work for her, many of whom are women and many of whom are people of color. So that doesn't make sense. She either hired sexist bigots, or it is what it seems like to be. And this is what it seems like to be. She has imposter syndrome. She knows she's not qualified to be the vice president, so she's trying to fake her way through. And as you try to fake your way through the second most powerful job in the country, you're going to fall flat a lot. And so when she falls flat, she takes that out on her staff. And the staff doesn't like that because they expected more from the first female of color vice president. And so they're trying to pivot out of these positions as fast as possible so they're not labeled Kamala people. Right. The other thing going on here with the Washington Post is she's low-hanging fruit. The real dysfunction in the White House is Joe Biden. Yeah. He is overseeing a cascade of policy failures. He's mentally unfit. He's almost physically unfit to do the job, clearly. And they're going after Kamala because it's easy. It's kind of like that personal parlor game that you get to do for clicks and stuff. If they want to do real brave journalism, put the scrutiny on Joe Biden at the same level you're giving it to Kamala. That's real journalism because that's what people really care about.
Richard, there are a lot of Kamala Harris Senate staffers and campaign staffers that didn't get to come to the White House, or maybe they didn't want to, or maybe they weren't asked. So there probably are a lot of people out there for the Washington Post and other journalists to contact to see, are you unhappy? And I'm going to imagine that a lot of them think, well, it wouldn't be so bad if I were there.
Listen, I think that's part of it. I also think that anytime you come into Washington without a clear arc of the narrative, what is your story? What's the story you're telling? What's the mission that you're on? The Washington media will create a narrative for you. And what we see happening here to Kamala over and over, story after story, is the Washington media is doing what they do best. They're creating an arc of the narrative for you with quotes from folks who are all anonymous, right, which is the palace intrigue, which we're used to. We saw this under the Donald Trump administration. We're seeing it again. And I think and listen, as a Democrat, I have some honest criticisms against the vice president. One being how we treated the Haitian migrants at the southern border after the State Department issued policy of removing some of our diplomats from Haiti because it was unsafe. But with that being said, I think where we need to see some improvement in her office is she needs to come up with a narrative for the American people and an argument for the American people of why she's there and what she's working on, and make that very clear so she can push back against a lot of the palace intrigue.
Okay, but Katie, she did run for president, so presumably she had she had an idea of what that narrative would be.
And the media helped drive her narrative by doing no vetting of her and her capabilities during the 2020 presidential election when Joe Biden decided that she was the best woman for the job. I mean, they built her up as the first woman of color to be the vice president, the first woman to be the vice president. They did nothing to ask former staffers what they think of her, what her main issues are, why it was so important to her to be locking people up in California as a prosecutor, but all of a sudden changed her mind when it came to her own policies and those of Joe Biden, why she changed her opinion on Joe Biden being a racist, for example. They didn't vet her at all when it came to those issues. But I will say, what the staffers are accusing her of, not reading briefings, really shows up when she does these interviews and starts laughing uncontrollably. And that also goes to show that maybe she is a little bit insecure about the issues she's talking about. But the media had a lot of involvement there in not asking her tough questions. On the other side of it, I have to question, too, whether these staffers are really...
Like, how high profile are they?
There's a lot of younger people who feel very entitled and who have a hard time dealing with high expectations. They take things very personally. So maybe she's a tough boss. Maybe this is true. Maybe both sides are right in some ways. But
remember what was it, the New York Times, when they printed that anonymous? It was a very senior administration official in the Trump administration, and it really wasn't.
Listen, the point is this: if you have something to say about the vice president, don't say it off the record. Say it on the record and be a man or woman about it.
Just go to work and do the work.
That part too.
And that will help.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.